The first thing Lady Anne heard was not the crack of the wheel. It was Miss Bellamy saying her name. The sound came through the shriek of frightened horses and the grinding of iron against stone, calm enough to be mistaken for an ordinary summons to the schoolroom. "Anne, look at me." The carriage had stopped at an angle on the long harvest road below Alderwick Hill. One rear wheel had split at the hub. The body leaned toward the drainage cut, its left door pressed into the bank, and its right door lifted uselessly above the road. The near horse kicked against the traces. The other strained downhill, dragging the broken axle by inches. Anne was 12 and had spent the 4 years since her mother's death teaching herself not to look frightened. Louisa, who was 9 and considered fear an insult, had gone white around the mouth. 6-year-old Cecily was on the floor beneath the opposite seat, one small hand caught in the fringe of a travelling rug. "I cannot move her," Anne called. "You need not. Put both feet against the lower panel and keep your back against the seat." Miss Marian Bellamy stood 3 yards away in a plain blue-grey walking dress, her bonnet gone, and dust caught in the dark hair at her temples. She had been following the carriage in the estate gig with the girls' lesson boxes. Now the gig stood abandoned behind her. A man in a dark riding coat had reached the broken carriage from the opposite direction. He held the bridle of the near horse and spoke with the natural authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Open the upper door," he ordered the coachman. "Get the children out." Louisa tried to climb. The carriage shifted. Cecily screamed. "No one moves," Marian said. The man turned, even covered in road dust. Sebastian Harrow, Duke of Alderwick, was unmistakable. The girl's uncle had the grave face reproduced on coins struck for no kingdom, and portraits commissioned by people who feared disappointing him. He had returned from London that morning, 2 days earlier than expected. "The axle will not hold," he said. "Then brace it." For one startled second, no one on the road breathed. Marian pointed to the stone marker beside him. "Your shoulder beneath the rear frame. The coachman will loosen the near trace, not both. If the horse feels the full weight, it will bolt." Sebastian looked from her to the carriage. Then he placed his shoulder where she had indicated. The choice altered everything. The coachman obeyed Marian's next instruction. The footman crawled beneath the raised side with a length of fencing rail. Sebastian took the weight of the frame while the rail was wedged under it. Marian crossed to the carriage only when the body had ceased to move. "Louisa," she said, "give me the buckle knife from the pocket beside you. His Grace said we should climb. His Grace is holding up the carriage. We shall reward him by not making it heavier on the wrong side." Sebastian's mouth tightened. It might have been anger. It might, Marian thought later, have been the beginning of respect. Louisa found the knife. Anne cut the rug fringe from Cecily's hand. Marian climbed onto the lower step and reached inside. "Anne comes first," Anne insisted. "She is the smallest. Cecily comes first because she is nearest the broken hinge. You will pass her to me. Louisa will keep her feet where they are. Promise we do not go to different houses." The words were so quiet Marian nearly missed them. Sebastian did not. His head lifted beneath the carriage frame. "Today," Marian said carefully, "all 3 of you leave this carriage together. I promise that." Anne passed Cecily into her arms. One by one, the sisters came out. When Louisa reached the road, the frightened horse plunged again. Sebastian shouted for her to stand clear. Louisa froze between 2 commands and looked at Marian. 3 steps toward me," Marian said. "No faster." Louisa moved. Only after the girls were safely behind the stone wall did Sebastian release the carriage. The rail snapped. The body sank into the ditch with a groan that made the servants cross themselves. Cecily buried her face against Marian's shoulder. Louisa seized Marian's hand. Anne stood close enough for the sleeve of her travelling coat to touch Marian's skirt. Sebastian looked at his nieces. None of them looked back. He had paid every bill placed before him since his sister's death. He had repaired the nursery roof, doubled the girls' allowance, and replaced 2 companions whom the housekeeper declared unsuitable. He had believed duty could be measured by the absence of neglect. On the harvest road he saw, for the first time, that safety was not the same as provision. Safety was the voice a frightened child could still hear. "Miss Bellamy," he said, "you will ride with them in my carriage. Your carriage is at the hall. It will be here in 10 minutes. She glanced toward the ridge. 4 riders in Alderwick livery were already approaching. Of course they were. "Then the girls will ride with me," she said. "Whether I do so at your Grace's command remains undecided." Louisa gave a small, disbelieving laugh. Sebastian's gaze settled on Marian, with an attention more unsettling than anger. "As you wish." At Alderwick Hall, a sealed packet waited on the silver tray in his library. The senior trustee's hand had written one word across the corner: Michaelmas. Sebastian broke the seal while road dust still marked his coat. The trustees appointed under Lady Helena's will would meet in 21 days. They would decide the permanent residence of her daughters. Lady Frances Vane, Helena's elder sister, had submitted a proposal to place Anne with one branch of the family and Louisa and Cecily with another. The letter did not accuse Sebastian of cruelty. It accused his household of instability. That accusation was harder to dismiss because, on the road, he had seen its proof. The physician found no broken bones. Cecily's wrist was bruised. Louisa had cut one knee, and Anne had bitten through the inside of her lip without noticing. Marian remained in the nursery while each injury was cleaned. Sebastian stood near the door, repeatedly asked whether anything more was required, and repeatedly received tasks rather than reassurance. He sent for warm water. He carried the basin himself when the maid was delayed. He held the lamp where Marian placed him. None of it restored his niece's attention to him, but he stayed. When the physician asked Cecily whether her wrist hurt, the child looked at Marian before answering. When he asked Louisa how the accident began, she described the sound of the axle and then added, "Uncle Sebastian did what Miss Bellamy told him." Sebastian received this assessment without protest. After the girls slept, Marian inspected the travelling carriage in the stable yard. The wheelwright had laid the broken pieces on a bench. The hub had not rotted. A hidden flaw in the timber had opened under the weight of the descent. No steward could reasonably have seen it during an ordinary inspection. Sebastian joined her beneath the lantern. "You expected negligence," he said. "I expected a cause. There is a difference. A cause may instruct us. Blame merely gives us someone to dismiss." He touched the split hub. "You thought I meant to dismiss the coachman. Did you?" For approximately half a minute, the admission surprised her. "Then Louisa repeated your instructions in the nursery." He continued. "I realized the man had obeyed the only person whose plan did not make the danger worse." Marian looked toward the upper windows. The girls were frightened before the wheel broke. Of the journey, of returning to a house where they do not know which woman will be responsible for them next month. His face closed. "They have you. I am employed from quarter to quarter. Your contract can be altered. A longer chain is still attached at one end." He studied her in the lantern light. "You describe employment as captivity while accepting its wages. I describe dependence accurately while honoring the work it purchases for the first time." Sebastian seemed to consider that two truths could stand together without cancelling each other. In the library, the trustee's notice remained open. The letter listed the failures of his household in restrained phrases: discontinuity of female supervision, conflicting methods of discipline, uncertainty of residence, insufficient consultation of the minor's preferences. Each phrase translated a frightened night or vanished face into language respectable men could discuss. Sebastian read the list twice. He remembered the succession of women whose names he had sometimes confused. He had judged them by references, wages, and whether the housekeeper reported scandal. He had never asked what departure taught a child. At midnight, he walked to the schoolroom wing. Light showed beneath Marian's door. He raised his hand, then did not knock. The Duke of Alderwick, who could enter any room in his house, stood outside the one room where authority would not supply the answer he needed. Marian learned of the review before dinner, not from Sebastian but from Anne. The girl appeared in the schoolroom doorway, holding an atlas upside down. She waited until Louisa and Cecily had followed the maid to wash, then placed the book on Marian's desk. "Lady Frances is coming to divide us." "Who told you that?" "No one." "Mr. Hale told Uncle Sebastian that the proposed placements were separate. The library door was not completely shut. Listening at doors is dangerous, so is not listening. Marian could not rebuke the answer without rebuking the intelligence that had made it. She closed the atlas. A proposal is not a decision. Mama's will says the trustees may decide. It did. Lady Helena Harrow, widowed and ill, had placed the management of her daughter's property in trust. Sebastian was named temporary guardian until Michaelmas of 1817. At that date, 3 trustees were required to review where the girls would live, who would direct their education, and whether the household provided continuous, respectabile. The will did not require Sebastian to marry. It required the trustees to prefer a settled family household with reliable female direction. Helena had written the phrase because she had known how easily girls became parcels passed between male estates. Sebastian's difficulty was not that he was unmarried. It was that the women appointed to supervise the nursery had changed 4 times in 3 years. One had left to marry, one had been dismissed for striking Louisa, one had treated Anne as an unpaid deputy, the last had resigned after Cecily's fever, declaring the sisters unmanageable. Marian had entered Alderwick Hall as governess, not companion or nurse. Within a month, the girls had stopped hiding each other's boots to prevent departures. Within 6 months, Cecily slept through most nights. Within a year, Anne had begun to study Latin because she wanted it, not because it made her useful. Yet Marian remained an employee. A governess could be dismissed between breakfast and tea. Will they ask us? Anne said. They should. That is not an answer. No, it is what I will insist upon. At dinner, Sebastian announced that Lady Frances and her husband would arrive the following week. The 3 girls sat in unusual silence. Marian occupied her customary place between the family and the servants, too educated for one world and paid by the other. The trustees will inspect the household, Sebastian said. There is no cause for alarm. Louisa put down her fork. If there is no cause, why has Mr. Hale brought 3 boxes of papers? Because Mr. Hale believes paper improves every difficulty. Does it? Sebastian glanced at Marian. Not every difficulty. After the girls retired, he asked Marian to remain in the drawing room. I intend to offer you a permanent appointment, he said, Chief Governess, with authority over all educational staff and a salary twice your present amount, until you dismiss me. I would give you a 5-year contract, which would give me damages after dismissal. It would not give the girls continuity. You assume I would break my word. The trustees are not asked to judge your intentions. They are asked to judge the household. He moved toward the hearth. You have formed a low opinion of my intentions. I have formed no opinion that matters. That is the defect in your proposal. He looked back. Marian kept her hand still. A chief governess remains a servant. Lady Frances may tell the trustees that the girls' daily security depends upon a woman with no recognized voice in their residence. Health or schooling, she will be correct. What would satisfy you? The question is what satisfies the will. Mr. Hale answered that question the following morning. The solicitor was a spare man with silver spectacles and the grave patience of someone paid to imagine disasters. Marriage would not guarantee the decision, he said, but a stable marriage, combined with Miss Bellamy's established care, would answer the strongest objection. Sebastian's expression did not change. Marian's did. You cannot mean me. I am identifying the legal weakness, not prescribing the remedy. Sebastian dismissed him. Marian rose to follow. Stay. She remained because leaving too quickly would have looked like fear. You trust neither my power nor my promise, he said. I trust the girl's behavior. It has been more consistent. They trust you. Yes. And the trustees require a settled household. She understood before he spoke again. The understanding brought neither surprise nor romance. It brought anger cold enough to clarify every object in the room. You require a wife before Michaelmas. I require the girls not to be separated. Those are not the same sentence. At present, they may have the same answer. He offered a marriage without courtship, without expectation of affection, and without interference in her daily work. She would receive a generous settlement and the social authority of his name. In return, she would remain at Alderwick and help demonstrate continuity. He spoke as though arranging adjoining properties. No, Marian said. For the first time since the carriage accident, he looked unprepared. You have not read the terms. I heard the term that matters. You would make me a duchess so that strangers must treat my knowledge as evidence. You have not proposed to give that knowledge any authority. My wife would possess authority, borrowed from you, withdrawn by you, interpreted by everyone around us according to whether you support her that morning. She crossed to the desk and placed one hand on the unsigned draft. If you require my name, your grace, you will also require my judgment. She took the papers with her. Marian did not sleep. She read the settlement beside the schoolroom fire, while the hall settled into silence. The language was generous wherever generosity cost Sebastian nothing he valued. She would have jewels, carriages, a townhouse allowance and rooms at every estate. Nothing in the draft prevented him from changing the girls' school, physician, residence or companions. Nothing protected the sisters from separation. Nothing required the trustees to receive her records. Nothing prevented him from dismissing every person who agreed with her. At 2 a.m, Marian took out a clean sheet of paper. By breakfast, she had written 6 amendments. Sebastian found them arranged beside his coffee. Joint Educational Authority. He read, no change of residence without written concurrence, preservation of household journals, an independent annuity, freedom to establish a training school, a right to live separately after the review. You omitted the no separation clause. I had not omitted it. I was saving my objection. Object. A medical emergency might require one child to travel. Then add medical necessity confirmed by an independent physician. Do not replace a safeguard with your discretion. He laid down the page. You intend to negotiate every verb. Your solicitor has done so on your behalf. For 3 days, the marriage settlement moved between the library and schoolroom. Sebastian accepted that Marian would direct education, but resisted the requirement that her journals be submitted unaltered. He argued that private household observations could be misread. She answered that a record edited by the person whose guardianship depended upon it was not evidence. He accepted her annuity without argument. That angered her more than resistance would have done. You will purchase my independence easily, she said. I will secure it adequately. Those are not the same. Must every sentence contain a trap? Only sentences written by people who can enforce them. The girls knew something had changed. Anne watched every closed door. Louisa attempted to bribe a footman for information using 2 preserved plums. Cecily drew 5 figures on a long strip of paper, then scratched one away and began again. On the 3rd afternoon, Anne entered the library without permission. She carried a folded letter. Mama wrote this to me, she said. I was to open it when I was 12. Sebastian stood. Where did you find it? In her prayer book. Miss Bellamy did not know. Anne unfolded the page, but did not surrender it. Mama said families sometimes separate children for convenience and call it prudence. She said I must not agree merely because adults praise me for being sensible. Sebastian's face changed. Helena's last letter to him lay unanswered in the same desk. Marian knew because she had seen him touch the drawer whenever his sister's name was spoken. You will not be asked to sacrifice yourself, he said. Can you promise? He looked at Marian. She did not rescue him from the question. I can promise to oppose it with every lawful means, he said. I cannot promise what the trustees will decide. Anne nodded slowly. It was not comfort, but it was truth. That evening, Sebastian signed the no separation clause. The next dispute concerned Marian's future school. She wanted to train governesses in accounts, correspondence, child development, and the law of household employment. Sebastian offered to endow it. No, she said. You refuse money for a school you cannot otherwise afford. I refuse a gift that could be described as the price of my agreement. Then make it a loan, at an ordinary rate, administered separately. You are determined to make generosity impossible. I am determined to make gratitude unnecessary. He stared at her, then laughed once. The sound was so unexpected that Marian forgot to guard her expression. Very well, he said. An ordinary loan. The final clause was the one he understood least. Marian would be free, after the trustees confirmed the girl's residence, to maintain a separate establishment without forfeiting her annuity or authority. No failure of affection would be treated as breach. "You propose to leave before we have married," he said. "I propose to know that staying means something." "To whom?" "To me." He signed. The wedding took place by special license in the chapel at Alderwick Hall. There were no flowers beyond late roses from the garden, no musicians and no guests except the girls. Mr. Hull, Mrs. Rowe and the rector. Marian wore dove-grey silk, because white would have made the ceremony pretend to an innocence it did not possess. Sebastian wore black. When the rector asked for their consent, each answered clearly. The girls had been told the truth in terms they could carry without burden. Their uncle and governess were marrying to make the household stable before the trustees. No child was responsible for affection between adults. Nothing they said or did could create or end the marriage. Telling them required longer than arranging the license. Anne listened without interruption, which Marian had learned was not the same as calm. Louisa asked whether a marriage made an opinion true. Cecily wanted to know if Marian would sleep in the West Wing, and whether being a duchess meant she could no longer teach spelling. "A marriage changes what the law and household recognize," Marian said. "It does not make every decision wise." "Then why do it?" Louisa asked. Sebastian answered before Marian could. "Because the trustees are correct about one thing. Miss Bellamy has carried responsibility without the authority to protect it. Marriage permits us to place that authority where the household and trustees cannot pretend not to see it. Could you not simply tell everyone to listen to her? I have told people many things. The difficulty is that another duke could untell them." Anne understood. "Or you could." Sebastian met her gaze. "Yes." Marian placed the amended settlement on the schoolroom table. The text meant nothing to Cecily and too much to Anne, but the physical existence of it mattered. "These terms do not ask us to love each other," Marian said. "They protect your schooling, your home together, and my right to speak about your care. They also protect my right to do work of my own." "Do you want to marry him?" Anne asked. Marian refused the easy answer that would have comforted the child by making the adult less truthful. "I have chosen to make this agreement. One may grow into other things, or it may not. The agreement remains." Sebastian's expression tightened, but he did not correct her. "Do you want to marry Miss Bellamy?" Louisa asked him. "I want her authority to be real." That was not the question. "No," he said. "It was not." He looked at Marian. "I want her to remain in this household. I am not entitled to ask for more than she has agreed to give." Anne exhaled. The answer was not romantic, but it placed no burden upon her to create romance. On the morning of the wedding, Marian packed her governess dresses into the wardrobe of the same small room she intended to keep. Mrs. Rowe arrived carrying the dove-grey silk. "A duchess may have both rooms," the housekeeper said. "The schoolroom chamber and the west apartments. A duchess may have an unreasonable number of rooms. That has often been the principal occupation of duchesses." Marian smiled despite herself. Mrs. Rowe laid the gown across the bed. "You know the servants are taking bets." "On what?" "Whether his grace will attempt to move you before Michaelmas." "And which side have you taken?" "I do not wager against a woman who amended Mr. Hale's settlement." In the chapel, Sebastian waited beside the rector. He did not look like a lover from a sentimental print. He looked like a man entering a promise whose limits he had finally been forced to read. When Marian reached him, he said quietly, "If you wish to stop, Hale will return every signed page to you. Your annuity can be executed separately." It was the first gift he offered that was not meant to secure the outcome. "I know," she said. "That is why I can continue." Louisa had considered this. "Then if you quarrel," she asked, "it will not be because I put grease on the schoolroom door." "It may be about the grease," Marian said. "It will not be your responsibility." After the service, Mrs. Rowe presented Marian with the ring of household keys. The nursery key was smaller than the others and worn smooth at the bow. Sebastian did not place the keys in Marian's hand. He held them out and waited. "Where do you wish to live?" he asked. "The Duchess's apartments are in the West Wing. Your rooms are beside the schoolroom. The schoolroom rooms. For now, as you wish." At breakfast the following morning, the butler approached Sebastian. "Your Grace, Her Grace has directed that Lady Anne will not attend Lady Winterton's musical. I assumed you would wish the order corrected." Every servant in the room became still. Sebastian folded his newspaper. "Why did you assume that—" The butler glanced at Marian. "The engagement is considered important. Her Grace directs the girl's education. If you question an instruction concerning it, you will address her." Marian met Sebastian's eyes across the table. For the first time, the clause had left the paper. The household did not transform because 2 signatures appeared beneath a settlement. For a week, every ordinary decision became a test. The dressmaker brought Marian designs suited to a duchess and looked wounded when Marian ordered 2 practical day dresses and nothing with a train. The steward sent schoolroom expenses to Sebastian for approval, until Sebastian returned them unopened. A footman addressed Marian as Miss Bellamy by habit, then blushed so fiercely that she pretended not to notice. More difficult were the disagreements no servant had manufactured. Sebastian believed Anne should attend formal calls before the review. Marian believed the girl should not be displayed as proof of domestic happiness. "The trustees must see that she can occupy her proper station," he said. "They should see that she is 12. She will enter society in 5 years. Then she has 5 years in which not to be rehearsed as evidence." He yielded the cause, but not gracefully. Louisa's lessons produced the next argument. Marian had allowed her to dismantle a broken clock under the gardener's supervision. Sebastian found springs and screws spread across the schoolroom table. "This is not an education. It is mechanics. She has arithmetic. Arithmetic is more persuasive when it makes something move." Louisa watched them from behind a book. Sebastian noticed. "You may continue," he said, "but the gardener will inventory every piece. So will Louisa." "Agreed." At night, Cecily woke calling for her mother. Marian usually reached her first because her rooms remained beside the schoolroom. On the 4th night, she found Sebastian already there, sitting stiffly in a small chair, while Cecily pressed both hands over her ears. "She will not let me touch her," he said. "Do not." Marian sat on the rug instead of approaching the bed. She began naming objects in the room: the blue curtain, the brass warming pan, the wooden horse, the moon at the window. After a moment, Cecily whispered the next object: Uncle Sebastian's shoes. Sebastian looked down as if surprised to possess them. "Very large shoes," Marian said. Cecily lowered her hands. They stayed until she slept. In the corridor, Sebastian said, "I thought comfort required touch. Comfort requires permission." He absorbed the answer without defending himself. The following day, Lady Frances Vane arrived with her husband and a clerk. Frances resembled Helena around the eyes, but carried grief like a polished box visible. Respectable and never opened in public, she greeted the girls with real affection. Anne submitted to her embrace. Louisa asked whether she still intended to separate them. Frances went pale. "I intend to keep you safe, in 2 houses. There are excellent schools near both." "That was not my question." Marian intervened before the exchange became cruelty in either direction. At dinner, Frances observed that Marian remained in rooms near the schoolroom. A duchess generally occupies the west apartments. A governess generally occupies the rooms nearest her pupils. Marian said, "Which are you?" The question was polite. Its edge was not, Sebastian answered. "She is the person with authority to decide where she is most useful." Frances turned to him. "Useful is an unusual word for a bride." "It was the first word I valued," he said. "It is not the only one." Marian felt the danger of that sentence and the warmth of it at once. Later, she found Sebastian in the library with Helena's letters open before him. He held the last one by its corners. "She asked me to come," he said. "I sent money and promised the following month. She died before it came." Marian did not say he could not have known. Guilt rejected easy mercy, because easy mercy asked nothing to change. "So you decided never to be late in provision again," she said. "Provision can be measured. Children are not accounts." "No, Accounts remain, where one puts them. It was the nearest he had come to admitting fear. Marian sat opposite him. The space between their chairs was modest and suddenly intimate. "You cannot prevent every departure," she said. "You wrote yourself a right to one." "Yes." "Do you intend to use it?" "I intend it to remain mine." He folded Helena's letter with careful hands. "I am beginning to understand the difference." The next morning, he issued a new household memorandum. Decisions concerning the girl's health, education or residence required Marian's approval. Questions were to be brought to both of them. No member of staff would be dismissed for presenting information requested by either. He had written it himself. Marian read the final line twice. The clause was no longer merely being obeyed. It was changing the shape of his authority. The idea of a family council came from Louisa, though she denied it. She had complained that adults held meetings whenever children were in danger and never invited the children until the danger had become a decision. Marian proposed half an hour every Sunday, in which each person at Alderwick's small breakfast table might name one fear, one wish and one practical matter. Sebastian objected to the word fear. "Then you may call yours a concern," Marian said. The first council was a disaster. Cecily wished for a pony in the schoolroom. Louisa feared Latin conjugations and wished to abolish France because French verbs were worse. Anne said she had no fear and no wish. Sebastian named accounts as his practical matter. "That is 3 practical matters and no fear," Louisa said. "You are cheating." He looked offended. Marian looked at her hands to hide a smile. The second council was quieter. Cecily feared sleeping in a different house. Louisa wished to visit the estate workshop. Sebastian agreed on condition that the foreman supervised. Anne again said nothing. At the third, she placed a folded list on the table. It contained the names of cousins, their estates, the number of daughters in each house, and the distance from Alderwick. Anne had been calculating where she might volunteer to live so that her sisters could remain together. "Lady Frances believes I would suit the Grafton house," she said. "If I agree, perhaps Louisa and Cecily may stay." Sebastian pushed back his chair. Anger crossed his face so swiftly that Anne flinched. He saw it and stopped. "I am not angry with you. You look angry. I am angry that you believed sacrifice was the only useful thing you could offer." Anne's chin trembled. "It is what sensible eldest daughters do. It is what adults praise when it saves them inconvenience," Marian said gently. Sebastian reached for the list, then left it where it was. "No promise will be made on your behalf without hearing you," he said, "and no praise will be given for making yourself smaller." Anne looked from him to Marian. "Is that in the clause?" "It is now in the household," Sebastian said. The change did not announce itself with music. It appeared in small habits. Sebastian began taking breakfast with the girls instead of reading correspondence alone. Louisa visited the workshop and returned with a wooden carriage model whose front wheel refused to turn. He spent an evening at the schoolroom table showing her how an axle should bear weight. "You did not know that on the road," Louisa said. "I knew the principle. Miss Bellamy knew what to do. The distinction has been made painfully clear." Cecily cut 5 figures from paper and joined their hands. 3 were small. 1 tall figure had improbably large shoes. The 5th wore a blue-grey skirt. "That is not how legal families are drawn," Sebastian said. "It is how Cecily's is drawn," Marian replied. He placed the figures in Helena's memory book for the harvest supper. Marian refused a grand entertainment. The tenants, household staff, trustees and neighbouring families were invited to a long meal in the old hall. The girls helped decide the seating. Anne placed Lady Frances beside Mrs. Rowe, who knew more about the children's illnesses than any relative. Louisa seated Sir Thomas beside the estate carpenter. Cecily placed Marian and Sebastian together, then moved Sebastian's card 2 places away because she wanted Marian beside herself, a humiliation from which I may never recover, he said. The supper was warm, imperfect and impossible to mistake for a stage portrait. Louisa spilled syllabub. Cecily fell asleep before the final toast. Anne disagreed with Sir Thomas about whether Latin sharpened judgment. The trustees saw not obedience but continuity. Lady Frances saw something more difficult. During supper, Cecily spilled water across the table. A footman moved to lift her away, while another servant replaced the cloth. Marian stopped him with a glance. Sebastian handed Cecily a napkin and asked what should happen next. I should wipe it, then begin at your side. No one scolded. No one excused. Cecily repaired what she could and remained at the table. Frances watched her. Helena would have sent us from the room for less. Helena was 17 when she began caring for you, Marian said. Young women often repeat the discipline that earned them safety. Frances's eyes sharpened. You speak as if you knew her. I know what Anne does when she believes adulthood requires her to disappear. The answer could have offended. Instead, Frances looked toward her eldest niece. Later, she found Marian in the passage outside the old hall. Edmund believes the girls' portions will be safer if their residence is divided among established families, she said. Are their portions unsafe here? Not financially. Then he means their influence. Frances did not deny it. Alderwick is large enough to swallow 3 girls. My cousins' houses are smaller. A small house may still make a child invisible, and a governess may overestimate the permanence of affection. The words found Marian's old wound with unsettling accuracy. Yes, she said. That is why affection is not the only protection I required. Frances glanced at the keyring at Marian's waist. You believe paper can make a family? No. Paper can prevent a powerful person from denying what a family has agreed to practice. Frances's expression changed by a degree. Helena hated contracts, perhaps because most were written by people who did not expect her to revise them. For one suspended moment, the sisters Governess and their maternal aunt stood on opposite sides of Helena's memory. Neither possessed the whole of it. I do not want them separated, Frances said at last. Then do not support a plan that requires it. I want them safe. Then help us prove what safety is. Frances did not promise, but when she returned to the hall, she asked Anne about Latin instead of asking whether she would prefer the Grafton house. The evening continued after the trustees departed. The girls removed their formal shoes and gathered in the schoolroom. Louisa produced the carriage model. Sebastian had found a new pin for the axle, but he made her fit it herself. Marian sat beside Cecily, repairing a torn paper hand with paste. You could draw them separately, Sebastian said. Cecily shook her head. Then they get lost. Paper tears when pulled too hard, Marian told her. Cecily considered this and added a narrow fold between each figure, enough space for the chain to bend. Sebastian watched the small alteration. Connection, Marian thought, was not the refusal of distance. Sometimes it was the space that allowed people to remain joined without being torn. Afterward, Marian found Sebastian carrying Cecily upstairs. The child's cheek rested against his coat. He moved slowly so as not to wake her. She permitted touch, he whispered. She requested it. His smile altered his whole face. In the schoolroom, they stood before the window, while rain began over the dark gardens. My former employer said I was indispensable, Marian said. 3 weeks later, his new wife dismissed me without a reference. I learned that indispensable is often the name given to a woman whose removal has not yet become convenient. Sebastian's smile disappeared. I chose you because the girls trusted you. You chose me because that trust strengthened your claim. At first, the honesty hurt more than denial. And now I know that the claim is worth nothing, if keeping it requires making your authority false. She turned toward him. He was close enough that she could see the faint scar beside his mouth, an imperfection no portrait included. Would you defend my authority if it damaged the guardianship? He did not answer at once. In that pause lay every limit of the progress they had made. I do not know, he said. Marian stepped back. On the same night, an anonymous packet was delivered to Lady Frances. Inside was the first draft of the marriage settlement, in Mr. Hale's precise hand. Marian was described as a suitable female head for a respectable household. None of her 6 clauses appeared. The exposure occurred in the morning room before breakfast. Lady Frances had summoned Sir Thomas and the other trustees. Edmund Vane stood beside the mantel, grave with satisfaction disguised as concern. Mr. Hale arrived carrying his dispatch box and left it unopened. When he saw the draft on the table, Marian read the paragraph once. Suitable female head. The words did not surprise her. Their public display did. Is it genuine? Sir Thomas asked. Mr. Hale adjusted his spectacles. It is an early draft prepared after His Grace asked what arrangement might answer the trustee's concern. Before he proposed to Miss Bellamy. Yes. Francis looked at Sebastian. You manufactured a wife to satisfy the will. I proposed a marriage for that purpose, he said. Marian changed its nature. Her amendments do not change your first intention. No. Marian had expected him to defend himself. His refusal to lie did not erase the injury, but it prevented it from becoming another. Edmund lifted the final settlement. An annuity, authority over the children and money for a school. An employee discovers her value at a convenient moment. Sebastian moved before Marian could answer. You will not describe her work as extortion in my house. Then how should we describe it? As the price of making my power accountable. The room went still. Marian wished the words had been spoken before the packet existed. Sir Thomas requested every draft, letter and household journal relevant to the girl's care. The review would proceed on Michaelmas morning. After the trustees left, Mr. Hale explained that the draft had been copied by a junior clerk who had recently accepted employment from Edmund Vane. The breach could be proved. Sebastian dismissed the information. The document is genuine. The manner of obtaining it matters, Hale said. Not enough. In the library, Sebastian spread Marian's journals across the desk. The earliest volumes recorded Cecily's fever, Louisa's punishment by the former companion, Anne's exhaustion, and Sebastian's repeated absence. These are private observations, he said. They are the record the trustees requested. They will be read as evidence that I failed. You did fail. He looked at her sharply. Marian's voice remained low. You also changed, if the later pages mean anything. The earlier pages must remain. If the trustees transfer the girls because of these books, will truth comfort you? No. Then why insist? Because safety built on edited evidence belongs to the editor. He turned away. You speak as if the outcome is not 3 children taken from their home. Do not use their fear to make dishonesty sound like love. The sentence struck. She saw it. And do not use my title to make virtue of your refusal to bend, he said. For one moment they faced each other not as husband and wife, nor duke and governess, but as 2 frightened people choosing different forms of control. Marian gathered the journals. I will submit them myself. They are household property. The old Sebastian had spoken. He heard it at the same moment she did. Marian released the books as if they had burned her. The clause requires preservation. It does not give me possession. Marian, you gave me a voice in the document. I am waiting to learn whether you can bear to hear it. She moved her belongings to the schoolroom wing, though she had never truly left it. The distinction was public now. Her trunk stood packed beside the bed. The girls were told only that the trustees required complete records and that adults disagreed about what should be included. Marian would not let them become messengers. Anne tried anyway. Uncle Sebastian has not eaten. Mrs. Rowe will see to him. You usually see to everyone. That is precisely the difficulty. Anne considered this and sat beside the trunk. If we stay together, will you leave? I may begin my school in town. Because of him, because it is my work. The answer was true, though not complete. At midnight, Sebastian remained alone in the library. On one side of the desk lay the early journals. On the other lay the later records. Family councils, medical notes, lesson plans, Louisa's workshop visits and Cecily's sleeping patterns. If he submitted only the later books, the trustees might see a stable household. If he submitted all of them, they would see why stability depended upon Marian, and how recently he had learned to share authority. Helena's last letter remained in the drawer. He opened it at last. She had not asked him to provide for her daughters. She had asked him to listen when they told him what safety meant. Before sunrise, Sebastian tied every journal into one packet. Michaelmas morning arrived clear and cold. The hearing took place in Alderwick's long library. No court had been convened. The authority belonged to 3 trustees acting under Helena's will, but the consequences felt as solemn as judgment. Sir Thomas sat at the centre table. Lady Frances and Edmund occupied one side. Sebastian sat on the other with Mr. Harrow. Marian had been offered the chair beside her husband. She chose a separate chair facing the trustees. The girls waited with Mrs. Rowe in the morning room. Their written wishes would be received. They would not be required to choose between adults in public. Sir Thomas began with the will. Its language was read carefully. Temporary guardianship until Michaelmas. A settled and respectable family household. Continuous female care. Attention to education. Affection and the sisters expressed welfare. Preference for keeping them together when consistent with safety. No sentence required Sebastian to marry. No sentence guaranteed he would keep them because he had the second trustee. Reverend Mark Ellison asked why Helena had chosen Michaelmas rather than the anniversary of her death. Mr. Hale produced the memorandum attached to the will. Michaelmas closed the trust's annual accounts. School fees and household appointments were renewed at the quarter day. Helena had feared that a winter transfer would disrupt education and make travel dangerous. Then the date is administrative, Edmund said. The date is practical, Marian replied before remembering she had not been asked. Sir Thomas inclined his head. Explain the distinction. Administration values a date because books close. Practical care values it because children should know where they will sleep before winter. The trustees recorded the answer. They examined the carriage accident. The wheelwright's report established that the break had not resulted from obvious neglect, yet the testimony revealed a different weakness. The girls did not respond consistently to Sebastian's commands because he had not established daily trust. Are children required to obey only the person they love best? Edmund asked. No, Marian said. They are more likely to obey a person whose instructions have proved predictable. Fear narrows attention. Familiar sequence reaches it. Sir Thomas asked Sebastian what he had learned from the accident. That rank can make everyone obey the wrong instruction faster. The answer produced no laughter. The trustees then examined the settlement clause by clause. Mr. Hale explained that Marian's annuity had been placed beyond Sebastian's unilateral control. The school loan was administered by separate trustees at an ordinary rate. Her educational authority continued even if she maintained a separate residence. Subject to annual review. You have created a wife who may oppose you. Leave your house and retain influence over your wards, Edmund said. Sebastian replied, I have recognized a guardian whose judgment does not become false when it inconveniences me. Frances looked at her husband then, and something in her allegiance shifted. The early journals were read. They recorded Sebastian's failures without cruelty. Marian had written what occurred, what response followed, and whether it helped. She had also recorded her own errors. The night she insisted Anne speak before she was ready. The week she mistook Louisa's anger for disobedience. The morning Cecily hid because Marian had threatened to change the lesson schedule without warning. You documented your own mistakes, Reverend Ellison said. A record designed only to prove the writer correct is another first draft, Marian answered. The later journals showed change. Sebastian attended 3 family councils, then 6. Cecily asked him to sit beside her after nightmares. Louisa sought him in the workshop. Anne disagreed with him twice in 1 week and suffered no loss of affection or privilege. Safety, entered line by line, looked less like perfection than repair. Mr. Hull placed the first draft and final settlement before the trustees. Sebastian stood. The marriage began as strategy, he said. I believed Miss Bellamy's presence would answer the weakness in my household. I offered status and money, because those were forms of value I understood. Frances watched without triumph. She refused. The authority in the final settlement exists because she required it, not because I intended it, Sir Thomas asked. Do you regard the marriage as a device? I regard my first proposal as one, and the marriage now. Sebastian looked at Marian only once. A partnership I have not yet earned the right to call permanent. He submitted every journal. Mr. Hale warned that the earliest entries documented severe instability. They document the truth, Sebastian said. He admitted his absences. He admitted that he had treated paid care as interchangeable, so long as wages were fair. He admitted that his first instinct, even after signing Marian's clause, had been to withhold evidence when truth threatened possession. If those admissions disqualify me, he concluded, then the girls should not remain with me, because my title makes concealment easier, but their residence should be decided with Miss Bellamy's evidence intact and their own wishes heard. It was not surrender. It was the first protection he had offered that did not depend upon control. Marian testified next. She described each girl separately. Anne was not naturally solemn. She had become solemn because adults rewarded her for absorbing uncertainty. Louisa's defiance increased when instructions were unexplained and disappeared when she was given meaningful work. Cecily's night fears were not proof she required constant indulgence. They were proof that predictable routines mattered. Can the Duke provide those routines? Sir Thomas asked. Yes, without you. Marian paused. Not yet with equal skill. That is not a condemnation. Care is learned by practice. Do you intend to remain at Alderwick? I intend to establish a school for governesses. The settlement permits me to do so. Whether my principal residence remains here must be a decision free of the guardianship claim. Edmund leaned forward. Then the household may be no more stable at Christmas than it was last year. A household dependent upon one woman's inability to leave is not stable, Marian said. It is trapped. Sir Thomas's pen stopped. Lady Frances asked to speak. She had believed separation cruel, but safer than instability. The carriage accident had confirmed her fear of inadequate supervision, she said. Yet during her stay, she had seen the girls disagree without panic, seek different adults without rivalry, and speak of their mother without being silenced. I still distrust the speed of this marriage, she said. But I distrust more any arrangement that treats the girls as three identical duties. Miss Bellamy does not. Edmund stared at his wife. The trustees withdrew. The wait lasted 2 hours. Sebastian stood at the library window. Marian remained by the cold hearth. I will not ask you to stay, he said. Good. I would like to. That is different. I am beginning to understand the difference. When the trustees returned, Sir Thomas read the decision. The sisters would remain together at Alderwick Hall. Sebastian's guardianship would continue. Limited by annual independent review, Marian was recognized as joint guardian for education and daily welfare under the settlement. With direct access to the trustees, no change of residence. School or primary medical care could occur without her written concurrence or trustee review. The girls' property would remain under separate financial trustees. Sebastian would post a bond securing compliance with the trust. It was not the unrestricted victory he once would have demanded. It was safer because it was not. Sir Thomas then addressed Marian. The decisive evidence was not the marriage. Your Grace, it was the system of accountability created by your amendments and supported by your records. Marian had spent her adult life in rooms where her knowledge became invisible the moment an employer repeated it. Now the senior trustee placed her work into the decision under her own name. Sebastian turned toward the assembled family and staff. The household remains together because Marian Bellamy knew what protection required and insisted that I could not withdraw it. When inconvenient, he did not call the achievement his gift. He did not make her praise part of his redemption. Mrs. Rowe brought the girls in. Anne read the decision twice. Louisa asked what a bond was. Cecily climbed into Sebastian's chair and announced that Michaelmas was less interesting than expected. Then she looked at Marian's packed trunks visible through the open corridor. Are you going? Marian knelt. For a little while. I am going to begin the school I told you about. Cecily's eyes filled. People may love one another and still travel, Marian said. People may leave a room without leaving a family. She hoped it was true. Marian planned to leave for the market town 2 days after Michaelmas. The building she had chosen was a modest brick house near the circulating library. It contained 2 classrooms, 4 attic bedrooms and a kitchen large enough for practical household instruction. Her annuity made the least possible. The ordinary loan she had negotiated would purchase books and pay the first 2 instructors. Sebastian did not alter the terms. He did not offer a larger building unless she remained at Alderwick. He did not ask the children to persuade her. He did not turn generosity into a road leading back to himself. On the evening before her departure, 5 places were set at the small breakfast table for Michaelmas supper. There should have been 4. Marian had expected to dine in her room. Anne had placed the 5th card. "This is not persuasion," she said before Marian could object. "It is supper." Louisa had repaired the wooden carriage. The front wheel turned cleanly now. Cecily's paper figures stood against the salt cellar. Their joined hands creased from use. Sebastian entered last. He carried no ring, no flowers and no document. After the girls retired, he asked Marian to walk with him in the walled garden. Autumn had thinned the roses. Gravel sounded beneath their steps. "Mr. Hale informs me that husbands do not generally court their wives," he said. "Mr. Hale has a narrow imagination. May I write to you? May I visit the school? If you request a time, may I hope that you will return?" Marian stopped beside the last flowering rose. "You may hope without treating hope as a claim. That will require practice. Most worthwhile skills do." He looked toward the lit schoolroom windows. "I loved my sister," he said. "I thought duty meant making certain I never failed her daughters materially. You taught me that protection can become another name for fear if no one else is allowed to define safety. The girls taught you. You made it possible for me to hear them." He did not say he needed her. Need had begun their bargain and nearly destroyed it. "I love you," he said. "I do not ask you to answer tonight. I ask for the opportunity to become a man to whom your free answer may one day be yes." Marian had imagined that freedom would feel like distance. Instead, it felt like the absence of a locked door. "Then begin with a letter," she said. His smile came slowly. "How long a letter? One that answers the questions asked. That may be the most difficult clause." "It is not a clause." "No," he said. "That is why it matters." Marian returned to Alderwick each Wednesday to conduct the girls' lessons and attend the family council. Sebastian visited the school when invited. He listened to governesses describe contracts that could be ended without reference, wages withheld for imagined offences, and affection demanded without authority. The school's first rule was written above no doorway and printed on no advertisement. Marian taught it in every lesson. Care without voice is dependence. Authority without accountability is control. By Christmas, her rooms in town were fully occupied. Sebastian's letters arrived twice each week. They contained no commands disguised as invitations. He wrote of Anne's translation, Louisa's improved axle, and Cecily's insistence that his shoes remained too large. He answered questions even when the answers made him look foolish. In January, Marian returned to Alderwick for a week of snow. The family council met around the same small table. Anne named her wish without apology. Louisa named a fear and did not mock it. Cecily placed a 6th chair beside Marian. "For whom?" Sebastian asked. "For any governess who needs help," Cecily said. Marian looked at the child, then at the man across the table. The household had not become a family because a duke required a wife before Michaelmas. It had become a family because each person had learned that love was not proved by holding someone in place. After the girls slept, Sebastian met Marian in the schoolroom. The repaired carriage stood on the shelf. Helena's memory book lay open beneath the paper figures. "May I ask again?" he said. This time, there was no deadline. No trustee waited in the library. No child's home depended upon the answer. Marian's school belonged to her. Her income could not be withdrawn. Her authority did not vanish if she refused him. He offered no new settlement. He offered his hand. Marian placed hers in it. "Yes," she said. The kiss that followed was quiet, deliberate and entirely unnecessary to save anyone. That was what made it love.